The crowds filled the streets of New Seoul like a river of cheering faces. Commander Hyunwoo Park stood tall on the victory platform, his dark blue uniform pressed to perfection. The morning sun caught the metal of his medals, making them shine, like stars against his chest. Each medal told a story of human courage and victory. The Solar Cross hung heaviest of all. Hyunwoo had earned it during the Battle of Titan, when human forces broke through the alien blockade that had trapped Earth's outer colonies for 6 months. He remembered that day clearly. The Vorthak ships had surrounded Titan like hungry wolves, cutting off food and supplies to the mining stations. Thousands of human families lived there, including children who had never seen Earth. Hyunwoo had led the breakthrough mission himself. His squadron of 12 ships faced over 50 Vorthak vessels. The aliens were bigger and stronger, but humans were smarter. They used the asteroid belt as cover, bouncing signals off the rocks to confuse enemy sensors. When the Vorthak ships moved to investigate false readings, human forces struck from behind. The battle lasted 14 hours. Hyunwoo lost half his squadron, but they saved Titan. More than 20,000 civilians lived because of that victory. The Solar Cross was heavy on his chest, but it felt right there. Next to it hung the Stellar Victory Medal, earned during the siege of Mars. The red planet had been humanity's second home for over a century. When the Vorthak attacked, they surrounded Mars completely. No ships could get in or out. The aliens planned to starve the planet into surrender, but humans never gave up easily. Hyunwoo had helped plan the Mars relief mission. They couldn't fight the alien fleet directly, so they got creative. Human engineers built weapons that could be launched from Earth's surface. The projectiles traveled for months through space, hitting Vorthak ships when they least expected it. The aliens didn't understand human patience. They thought the siege would be easy. Instead, human weapons kept finding them, picking off their ships one by one. After 8 months, the Vorthak fleet retreated. Mars was free again. The crowd below cheered as Hyunwoo pointed to his third medal, the Hero of Humanity Award. This one meant the most to him. He had earned it during the final assault on the Vorthak homeworld, the battle that ended the war forever. The alien planet had been beautiful once, with purple skies and silver oceans, but beauty meant nothing when the enemy used it as a base to attack human worlds. The Vorthak had struck first without warning. They destroyed human colonies, killed millions of innocent people. Earth had no choice but to respond. Hyunwoo had commanded the final attack fleet, 200 human ships, the largest force humanity had ever assembled. The mission was simple: end the Vorthak threat forever. No more attacks on human worlds. No more fear for human children. The battle had been fierce. Vorthak ships were fast and deadly, but human technology was better. Earth scientists had spent years developing new weapons: plasma cannons that could cut through any armor, quantum bombs that could destroy entire fleets, bioweapons that targeted alien biology specifically. The final assault lasted 3 days. Hyunwoo's forces fought through the Vorthak defense fleet, past their orbital stations down to the planet's surface. When it was over, the alien homeworld was broken. Their military was destroyed, their government surrendered unconditionally. Humanity had won. The threat was over. Human children could sleep safely again. The crowd cheered louder as Hyunwoo finished his speech. Parents lifted their children on their shoulders so they could see the hero better. Veterans in the audience saluted. News cameras captured every moment for broadcasts across the solar system, but not everyone in the crowd was celebrating. Near the back, a young woman stood quietly in the shadow of a building. She wore a dark hood that covered most of her face. Her name was Sojin Kim, though that was not the name she had been born with. Sojin watched the ceremony with different eyes. When Hyunwoo spoke of the Battle of Titan, she remembered the refugee ships that had been destroyed in the crossfire. Human reports called them enemy vessels, but Sojin knew better. They had been filled with families trying to escape the war. When he mentioned the Mars siege, Sojin touched her arm where old scars hid beneath her clothing. Those scars came from human weapons, the ones that were supposed to be precision strikes against military targets. Sojin had been in a civilian shelter when the humans attacked. The weapons were precise, but they didn't care who they killed. As Hyunwoo spoke of the final victory, Sojin's hand moved to her throat. More scars waited there, hidden by her high collar. The quantum bombs had ended the war quickly, but they had poisoned her homeworld for generations. The bioweapons had been designed to kill her people slowly, making them suffer before they died. Sojin had survived because she was different from others of her kind. Her people could change their appearance, shift their bodies to look like other species. It was a natural ability, like humans changing the color of their skin in sunlight. Sojin had used this gift to escape the dying homeworld, to hide among the humans who had destroyed everything she loved. Now she lived in their cities, spoke their language, wore their clothes. She looked human, but the scars remained. They couldn't be hidden or healed. Every day she felt the pain of what human heroes had done to her world. The parade continued for another hour. Hyunwoo shook hands with government officials and signed autographs for children. He smiled and waved, proud of his service and his medals. The war was over, humanity had won, and peace would last forever. Sojin watched until the end, then melted back into the crowd. She had work to do. The commander would be easy to find later. Human heroes loved to talk about their victories, especially in the quiet cafes where they thought no one was listening. Soon, Hyunwoo Park would learn that every medal has two sides, every victory has a cost, and every hero's story sounds different when you hear it from the people who lost. 3 days after the victory parade, Hyunwoo Park sat alone in the Stellar Cafe. The small restaurant was tucked away in the diplomatic quarter of New Seoul, far from the crowds and cameras. He liked the quiet here. It helped him think. Commander wore civilian clothes today, a simple gray jacket and dark pants, but his medals were still there, pinned to his jacket like old friends. He never went anywhere without them. They reminded him of what humanity had accomplished, what they had survived. Hyunwoo spread several files across his table, reports from the reconstruction efforts on former Vorthak worlds, charts showing how quickly human colonies were expanding into empty alien territory, pictures of new cities being built where alien settlements once stood. The work was going well. Human engineers were fast and efficient. Within 5 years, all traces of the Vorthak civilization would be gone. New human families would live in those worlds, safe from any alien threat. It was the final victory, the last chapter of a war that had nearly destroyed humanity. A shadow fell across his table. Hyunwoo looked up to see a young woman standing beside him. She was pretty in a quiet way, with dark hair and careful eyes. Her clothes were simple but clean, the kind worn by researchers and academics. "Excuse me," she said politely. "Are you Commander Park? From the victory parade?" Hyunwoo straightened in his chair. Even in civilian clothes, people recognized him. It happened often these days. "Yes, I am. How can I help you?" The woman smiled and gestured to the empty chair across from him. "My name is Sojin Kim. I'm a cultural researcher studying the war's impact on human society. Would you mind if I asked you a few questions? I promise it won't take long." Hyunwoo considered for a moment, then nodded. "Of course, please, sit down. Always happy to help with academic research." Sojin settled into the chair gracefully. She carried a small notebook and pen, like any proper researcher would. Her movements were smooth and controlled, but Hyunwoo didn't notice anything unusual about that. "Thank you for your time," Sojin said, opening her notebook. "I'm particularly interested in how the war changed human technology and culture. Your role in the conflict makes you a perfect interview subject." Hyunwoo felt a familiar warmth in his chest. He loved talking about the war, about how humans had overcome impossible odds. "Where would you like me to start?" "Perhaps with your decorations," Sojin suggested, glancing at his medals. "Each one represents a significant achievement, doesn't it?" Hyunwoo's hand moved unconsciously to his solar cross. "This one is from the Battle of Titan. We broke a 6-month siege that day, saved over 20,000 civilian lives." Sojin made notes as he spoke. "How did you accomplish that?" "The reports mention superior tactics, human ingenuity," Hyunwoo said with pride. We used the asteroid belt as cover, created false sensor readings to confuse the enemy. The Vorthak were powerful, but they thought in straight lines. Humans think in curves. What about civilian casualties during the battle? So-Jin asked quietly. Hyunwoo paused. The question was reasonable, but something in her tone made him uncomfortable. There were some, unfortunately. War is never clean, but we saved far more lives than we lost. So-Jin nodded and wrote something down. And your Stellar Victory Medal? That's from the Mars siege? 8 months of enemy blockade, Hyunwoo said, his voice growing stronger. They tried to starve an entire planet into surrender. We couldn't break through their fleet directly, so we developed long-range orbital weapons. Took months to reach their targets, but the aliens never saw them coming. Impressive planning, So-Jin said. How many Vorthak ships were destroyed in those attacks? 47 confirmed kills, Hyunwoo replied. Each one was a strategic target, a vital part of their siege network. So-Jin's pen scratched across the paper. Were any of those ships carrying non-combatants? Families, perhaps? The question hit Hyunwoo like a cold wind. What do you mean? Military. Intelligence sometimes makes mistakes, So-Jin said carefully. Ships that look like warships might actually be refugee vessels. It happens in any conflict. Hyunwoo felt defensive suddenly. Our targeting was precise. We hit military vessels, only. The Vorthak wouldn't have put civilians in a combat zone, so Jin looked at him for a long moment, then made another note. Of course. And your Hero of Humanity award? That's from the final assault on their home world? Hyunwoo's chest swelled with pride again. The most important battle in human history. We ended the war that day. Made sure the Vorthak could never threaten us again. Tell me about the weapons used in that battle, So-Jin said. I understand humanity developed some remarkable new technologies. Revolutionary, Hyunwoo agreed. Plasma weapons that could cut through any armor. Quantum bombs for fleet engagements. Bioweapons designed specifically for Vorthak physiology. So-Jin's pen stopped moving. Bioweapons? Highly targeted, Hyunwoo explained quickly. They only affected Vorthak biology. Completely harmless to humans or other species. It was a humane way to end the war quickly. Humane, So-Jin repeated quietly. Better than a long ground campaign, Hyunwoo said. Faster, cleaner. Less suffering for everyone involved. So-Jin set down her pen and looked directly at him. Her eyes were dark and deep, holding secrets Hyunwoo couldn't read. How long did those bioweapons take to work? I'm not sure I understand the question. Did they kill quickly? Or slowly? Hyunwoo shifted in his chair. I wasn't involved in the technical development. That was a job for scientists and engineers. But you used them. So-Jin pressed gently. You gave the orders to deploy them. To end the war, Hyunwoo said firmly. To protect human lives. Sometimes commanders have to make hard choices. So-Jin picked up her pen again, but she didn't write anything. What happened to Vorthak survivors after the war ended? Survivors? Hyunwoo frowned. There weren't many. The final assault was very thorough. But some must have lived, So-Jin said. Children, perhaps. Civilians who weren't near the major cities when the attacks came. Hyunwoo looked at his files spread across the table. Maps of former Vorthak worlds, now empty and ready for human colonization. The reports mentioned scattered populations. They were relocated to designated zones for monitoring and eventual integration. Integration into what? Human society, I suppose. Those who could adapt, so Jin closed her notebook and set it aside. The interview seemed to be ending, but Hyunwoo felt like something important had been left unsaid. Thank you for your time, Commander, So-Jin said. You've been very helpful. Will you publish your research? Hyunwoo asked. So-Jin smiled, but there was sadness in it. Perhaps. The truth should be remembered, don't you think? All of it. She stood to leave, then paused. Commander Park, may I ask you something personal? Of course. When you look at your medals, what do you see? Hyunwoo glanced down at the decorations on his chest. I see humanity at its best. Courage, ingenuity, the will to survive against impossible odds. So Jin nodded slowly. I see. Thank you again for your time. She walked away, leaving Hyunwoo alone with his files and his medals. Something about the conversation bothered him, but he couldn't put his finger on what it was. The woman had asked reasonable questions, the kind any researcher might ask, but there had been something in her eyes, something that suggested she already knew the answers to every question she asked, as if she wasn't really interviewing him at all but testing him somehow. Hyunwoo shook his head and turned back to his reports. There was work to do, worlds to rebuild, a future to secure. The war was over, humanity had won, and that was all that mattered. So-jin hadn't left the cafe after all. Hyunwoo looked up from his reports to find her standing by his table again, her notebook forgotten on a nearby chair. The afternoon light streaming through the window caught something different in her expression now. The polite mask of the researcher was gone. I lied to you, she said quietly. I'm not a cultural researcher. Hyunwoo set down his pen and studied her face. Then who are you? Instead of answering, So-jin began to unbutton her high-collared jacket. Hyunwoo watched in confusion as she peeled back the fabric, revealing her throat and the base of her neck. His breath caught in his throat. Scars covered her skin like a map of pain. Not random marks from accidents or surgery, but precise patterns burned deep into her flesh. The lines were too clean, too deliberate to be natural. And the shape? Hyunwoo had seen marks like these before, in classified medical reports from the final assault. These came from your heroes, So-jin said simply, tracing one finger along a long scar that curved from her collarbone to her shoulder. This one is from your merciful plasma weapons. They don't kill immediately, you know. They burn slowly, layer by layer, giving you plenty of time to think about what's happening to you. Hyunwoo stared at the marks, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. That's impossible. You're human. So? Jin smiled sadly and continued removing her jacket. More scars appeared on her arms, intricate patterns that looked almost like writing. I was 13 when your forces attacked my home, colony. Old enough to understand what was happening, young enough to heal from injuries that would have killed an adult. You can't be. Hyunwoo started, then stopped. The scars were real. The pain in her voice was real. But she looked completely human. Vorthok, So-jin finished for him. We call ourselves the Kethvar in our own language, but you humans never bothered to learn that. Vorthok was easier for you to pronounce, I suppose. She rolled up her sleeves, revealing more scar tissue. Each mark was a story written in burned flesh. My people have a natural ability you might call shape-shifting. We can alter our appearance to match other species. It helped us survive on different worlds, adapt to new environments. Evolution gave us the gift of flexibility. Hyunwoo's hand moved unconsciously to his stellar victory medal. The Mars siege, those weren't warships. Some were, So-jin said, calmly. But many were refugee vessels, families fleeing the war zones looking for safe places to rebuild their lives. Your long-range weapons didn't distinguish between military targets and civilian transports. She showed him a cluster of small, round scars on her wrist. These are from the atmospheric poisoning on Colony 7. Your bioweapons weren't as precise as your scientists claimed. They affected anyone with Vorthok genetic markers regardless of age or military status. Hyunwoo felt sick. The report said there were minimal civilian casualties. Human reports, So-jin said. Written by humans, for humans. Do you know what your bioweapons actually do to our bodies? No. They attack our nervous system first. We lose the ability to hold our shape-shifted forms. Then comes the pain, starting in our extremities and working inward. It takes weeks to die, and every moment is agony. Your scientists designed it that way deliberately. So, Jin pulled off her remaining outer layer, revealing more scars across her back and ribs. Some were clean plasma burns, others were the twisted marks left by chemical weapons. All of them told stories that didn't appear in any human victory report. This one, she said, pointing to a particularly ugly scar near her heart. came from your precision strike on the civilian shelters during the final assault. I was trying to help evacuate the children when your quantum bomb started falling. Hyunwoo's metals felt like lead weights on his chest. Why are you showing me this? Because you need to see it, Sojin said. She began putting her clothes back on, covering the evidence of human brutality. You stand on platforms and talk about human heroism, about the glorious victory over the evil aliens. But you've never seen what your heroism actually looks like. We're defending ourselves, Hyunwoo said weakly. You attacked us first. Yes, we did. Sojin's admission surprised him. My people were dying. Our homeworld was poisoned by industrial accidents. Our colonies were failing. We needed new worlds to survive. So our leaders made a desperate choice. They attacked the nearest spacefaring species, hoping to take their worlds by force. She sat back down across from him, her movements careful and controlled. It was wrong. It was evil. Many of my people knew it was wrong, but we were too afraid of extinction to stop it. Then why? Hyunwoo began. Why am I angry at you? Sojin finished. Because your people didn't just defend yourselves. You didn't just push us back or force us to surrender. You systematically exterminated our entire civilization. She leaned forward, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Do you know what happened? After your final victory? Your forces went to every Vorthak world, every colony, every space station. They used weapons specifically designed to cause maximum suffering before death. They made sure our children died slowly, in agony, as punishment for what our leaders had done. Hyunwoo wanted to argue, to defend the necessity of the final assault. But the words wouldn't come. The scars on Sojin's body were proof of something he'd never wanted to acknowledge. How many of you are left? He asked quietly. Here on Earth, maybe a dozen survivors who can maintain human appearance long enough to hide. In the entire galaxy? Sojin shrugged. A few hundred, scattered and dying. Your bioweapons have long-term effects. Even those who survived the initial attacks are slowly being poisoned by genetic damage. Why didn't you seek revenge? Hyunwoo asked. Why didn't you try to hurt me? Sojin looked at him with something that might have been pity. Because revenge won't bring back my family. It won't heal these scars or undo what happened. All it would do is make me into the monster you believed we all were. She stood up again, preparing to leave. I'm not here for revenge, Commander Park. I'm here to make sure someone remembers what really happened. Someone needs to know that your medals were bought with the screams of children. Hyunwoo stared at his hands, unable to meet her eyes. What do you want from me? Nothing, Sojin said. I just wanted you to see what your heroism looks like from the other side. Every medal on your chest represents thousands of deaths that didn't need to happen. Every victory you celebrate cost my people everything they had ever been. She picked up her notebook from the other chair. Keep wearing your medals, Commander. Keep telling your stories of human triumph. But remember that every time you do, someone like me is listening. Someone who lived through what you call victory. As she walked toward the door, Hyunwoo called after her. Sojin, why did you take that name? It's human. She paused without turning around. Because my real name died with everyone who knew how to pronounce it. Sojin Kim is all I have left of who I used to be. Then she was gone, leaving Hyunwoo alone with his medals and the terrible weight of truth. Hyunwoo couldn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Sojin's scars. The precise burns from plasma weapons, the twisted marks left by bioweapons, the small, round scars that spoke of children dying in poisoned air. He sat, in his apartment, surrounded by commendations and awards from his military service. Photos of him with other human heroes lined the walls, headlines from news reports praising his strategic brilliance. All of it felt hollow now. Sojin had given him her contact information before leaving the cafe. Just a simple address in the old district of the city. She'd told him to come if he wanted to know more, if he was brave enough to see the rest of the truth. Hyunwoo stared at the paper with her address until morning came. The old district hadn't been rebuilt since the war. Many of the buildings still showed damage from the Vorthak's initial attack on Earth 5 years ago. Broken windows were patched with metal sheets. Walls bore the scorch marks of alien weapons. Most humans avoided this area, preferring the gleaming new structures in the city center. But some people had to live somewhere. So Jin's building was a converted warehouse, the kind of place where refugees and displaced persons found cheap shelter. Hyunwoo climbed 3 flights of stairs to reach her door, his medals hidden beneath a civilian jacket. She answered on the first knock, as if she'd been waiting for him. "I thought you might come," she said, stepping aside to let him enter. The apartment was small and sparse, a few pieces of furniture, some books, a hot plate for cooking. But the walls were covered with something that made Hyunwoo's breath catch in his throat. Pictures. Hundreds of them. Images of Vorthak life before the war. "I saved these from the data cores of destroyed ships," Sojin explained, watching his reaction. "Most humans have never seen what my people actually looked like, what our worlds were like." Hyunwoo moved closer to examine the images. The Vorthak in their natural form were beautiful in an alien way, tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to shift color in different light. Their faces were elongated but expressive, with large eyes that held obvious intelligence. "This was my family," Sojin said, pointing to one picture. A group of Vorthak stood together in what looked like a garden. 2 adults and 3 children, their faces bright with happiness. "My parents and my younger siblings. They died in the final assault." She moved to another image. "This was our homeworld before the industrial accidents. Purple skies, silver oceans, cities that grew like living things instead of being built with metal and stone." Hyunwoo studied the pictures, trying to reconcile these peaceful scenes with the monsters he'd been trained to fight. "Your people don't look like warriors." "We weren't," Sojin said. "The Vorthak were explorers, scientists, artists. We'd been traveling between stars for thousands of years, but always as peaceful visitors. War was foreign to us." She led him to a section of wall covered with images of Vorthak colonies, settlements that looked more like gardens than cities, where buildings curved organically around natural features. Children played in open spaces while adults worked on projects that seemed to blend technology with art. "This changed everything," Sojin said, showing him pictures of a dying world. The purple sky was now gray with poison. The silver oceans had turned black. Cities lay abandoned, their organic architecture withering like dying plants. "What happened?" "Industrial accidents," Sojin explained. "We'd been mining certain minerals for centuries without understanding their long-term effects. By the time our scientists realized the danger, it was too late. The entire planet was becoming uninhabitable." She showed him more pictures. Vorthak, ships loaded with refugees, families carrying everything they owned, children who had never known any world but the dying one they were leaving behind. "We had maybe 20 years before complete ecosystem collapse," Sojin continued. "Our leaders searched desperately for new worlds, but everywhere we looked, other species had already claimed the habitable planets. We were running out of time." Hyunwoo felt a cold understanding creeping into his mind. "So you attacked us." "So our leaders decided to attack the nearest species with suitable worlds," Sojin corrected. "Most of my people opposed the war. We believed there had to be another way, some form of cooperation or trade that could save both species." She showed him images from the early days of the conflict, Vorthak ships attacking human colonies, but the pictures revealed something the human reports had never mentioned. Many of the alien vessels were clearly civilian transports, not military craft. "Our government militarized everything," Sojin explained. "Cargo ships, passenger liners, even scientific research vessels. They mounted weapons on any hull that could fly and called it a navy. Most of the crews had never fired a shot in anger before the war began." The next series of images showed the progression of the conflict from the Vorthak perspective. Human ships appeared in their territory, weapons more advanced than anything the aliens had ever seen. Vorthak vessels were destroyed, with efficiency that spoke of long military tradition. "Your people were born warriors," Sojin said with something like admiration. "Every human ship was designed for battle. Every weapon was crafted to kill as effectively as possible, We were scientists playing at war against a species that had turned warfare into an art form. Hyunwoo studied an image of a Vorthak colony under human attack. The organic buildings were burning, their curved walls collapsing like dying trees. But what struck him most were the figures running through the streets. They weren't soldiers or officials. They were families, children, old people who moved slowly even in the face of death. "Why didn't your leaders surrender sooner?" Hyunwoo asked. "They tried," Sojin said quietly, "multiple times during the first 2 years of the war, but human demands were always the same. Complete surrender, total occupation, the end of Vorthak, civilization as an independent entity." She showed him copies of the surrender proposals, documents he'd never seen in any human military briefing. The Vorthak offered to withdraw from all disputed territory, to share their scientific knowledge, to accept human oversight of their government. Anything to stop the killing. Your leaders rejected every offer, Sojin continued. They said the only acceptable outcome was the complete elimination of the Vorthak threat. Not just military defeat, but the end of our species as a spacefaring civilization. Hyunwoo felt his understanding of the war shifting like sand beneath his feet. "We were defending ourselves." "Yes," Sojin agreed. "At first. But somewhere along the way, defense became revenge. Revenge became extermination." She led him to the final section of images, pictures from the last days of the war, when human forces had reached the Vorthak homeworld itself. The dying planet was still beautiful in its way, but the approaching human fleet filled the purple sky like a storm cloud. "This was taken from the last refugee ship to escape," Sojin said, pointing to an image of human vessels surrounding the planet. "Most of the population was already dead from the bioweapons you deployed months earlier. The survivors were mostly children and elderly people who couldn't be evacuated." The final pictures showed the aftermath. The Vorthak homeworld cracked and broken, its surface scarred by weapons that could shatter continents. Empty cities where millions had once lived. Oceans turned to glass by the heat of quantum explosions. "Your final assault wasn't a military victory," Sojin said. "It was the systematic murder of everyone my people had ever been." Hyunwoo sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the weight of what he was seeing. All his medals, all his pride, all his certainty about the righteousness of human victory, it was built on a foundation of genocide. "Why are you showing me this?" he asked. "Because you need to understand what really happened," Sojin replied. "Not the sanitized version in your victory reports, but the truth. My people made a terrible mistake when we attacked you. We deserved to be stopped, to be defeated. But we didn't deserve to be erased from existence." She sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap. "I'm one of maybe 12 Vorthak left, alive on Earth. We hide among you, slowly dying from the long-term effects of your bioweapons. In another generation, maybe 2, there will be no trace that we ever existed. Except for these pictures." "Except for these pictures," Sojin agreed. "And the memories of a few humans who choose to remember what their heroism really cost." 2 weeks later, Hyunwoo stood in Memorial Garden as the sun set over New Seoul. The monument to human war dead rose before him like a giant crystal, each face carved with the names of soldiers who had died fighting the Vorthak. He had attended the dedication ceremony 3 years ago, proud to honor the sacrifices that made victory possible. Now the names looked different. Each one represented someone who had died defending humanity, but also someone who had participated in what Sojin called genocide. Good people who had followed orders. Heroes who had committed atrocities without knowing what they were really doing. "I thought I might find you here." Hyunwoo turned to see Sojin approaching through the garden paths. She wore the same simple clothes as before, her scars hidden beneath long sleeves and a high collar. Other visitors walked past them without a second glance, seeing only 2 humans sharing the memorial space. "I've been thinking about what you showed me," Hyunwoo said, and he touched his solar cross through his jacket. "I keep trying to find a way to make it not true. To convince myself that you're lying or mistaken or that there's some explanation that makes it all acceptable." So Jin nodded. That's normal. Humans are good at protecting themselves from painful truths. But it is true, isn't it? All of it. Yes. They stood in silence for a while, watching the last light fade from the sky. The memorial's crystal surface began to glow with internal lighting, making the carved names seem to float in the darkness. There are others like you, Hyunwoo said finally. It wasn't a question. A few, Sojin confirmed. We meet sometimes, share stories, help each other survive, but mostly we stay hidden. It's safer that way. Hyunwoo pulled a datapad from his pocket and held it out to her. I've been reading classified files, using my security clearance to access records that were sealed after the war. So Jin took the device and scrolled through the documents he'd collected. Her expression remained calm, but Hyunwoo saw her hands tighten slightly as she read. Medical experiments on Vorthak prisoners, she said quietly. Testing new bioweapons on live subjects. Orders to target civilian shelters during the final assault. It's all there, Hyunwoo said. Everything you told me confirmed in our own reports. The systematic nature of it, the deliberate choice to cause maximum suffering. So Jin handed the datapad back to him. What will you do with this information? I don't know yet. Hyunwoo stared at the memorial, at the names of friends and colleagues who had died believing they were saving humanity. If I reveal this, it destroys everything. The victory, the pride, the belief that we were the good ones in this war. And if you don't reveal it? Then everyone who died on both sides died for a lie. So Jin walked closer to the memorial, her fingers tracing one of the carved names. This person, Lieutenant Chang Min-ho, he was at the Battle of Titan. Hyunwoo joined her. He was in my squadron. Good pilot, better friend. Saved my life twice during that engagement. He also fired the shots that destroyed the refugee ship carrying my cousin's family, Sojin said matter-of-factly. 7 children, under the age of 10. They were trying to evacuate to neutral space when your forces caught them. Hyunwoo felt the familiar pain in his chest, the weight of truth pressing down like gravity. He didn't know. None of us knew what we were really shooting at. Does that make them less dead? No, Hyunwoo admitted. It doesn't. So Jin moved to another section of the memorial. What about this one? Commander Lee Jae-sung? Mars siege. He developed the long-range targeting systems that broke the Vorthak blockade. Those same systems were used to destroy the hospital ships treating wounded civilians, Sojin said. Thousands of my people died because your friend was very good at his job. Hyunwoo followed her as she walked around the memorial, pointing out names and connecting them to specific atrocities. Each human hero had unknowingly participated in war crimes. Each act of courage had enabled some form of systematic brutality. You're trying to make me hate them, Hyunwoo realized. My friends, my comrades. No, Sojin said firmly. I'm trying to show you that good people can do terrible things when they're told those things are necessary. Your friends weren't monsters. They were soldiers following orders, believing they were protecting their families. She stopped walking and faced him directly. The real monsters were the leaders who gave those orders, the scientists who designed weapons specifically to cause suffering, the politicians who chose extermination over coexistence. Hyunwoo thought about his own role in the war, his own decisions. What does that make me? That's for you to decide, Sojin said. You followed orders, but you also gave them. You trusted your superiors, but you also made choices about how to carry out your missions. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small device that looked like a data storage unit. This contains testimonies from every Vorthak survivor I've been able to locate. Their stories, their memories, their account of what really happened during the war. Hyunwoo took the device, feeling its weight. Such a small thing to hold so much pain. Why are you giving this to me? Because someone needs to know, Sojin said. Someone with the authority and respect to make people listen. I'm just a hidden, alien in human skin. But you're a war hero. If you speak, people will pay attention. And if I don't, Sojin shrugged, then in another generation, maybe 2, there will be no one left who remembers what really happened. History will record the human victory over the evil aliens, and that will be the end of it. She turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I don't blame you personally for what happened to my people. You were a soldier in a war you didn't start, fighting for a cause you believed was right. But now you know the truth. What you do with that knowledge defines who you really are. As Sojin walked away, Hyunwoo remained by the memorial. The data storage device felt heavy in his hand, weighted with the testimonies of a dying people. Around him, the crystal monument glowed with names of human heroes, each one carrying a hidden legacy of unintended atrocity. Other visitors passed by in the darkness, couples holding hands, families teaching their children about the brave soldiers who had saved humanity from extinction. None of them knew that their heroes had also committed genocide. None of them wanted to know. Hyunwoo looked down at his medals, visible now in the memorial's light. The solar cross that represented 20,000 saved lives, but also an unknown number of refugee deaths. The stellar victory medal that celebrated breaking a siege but ignored the hospital ships destroyed in the process. The Hero of Humanity award that marked the end of the war, but said nothing about the systematic extermination that had made victory possible. He could expose the truth, use his reputation and authority to force humanity to confront what they had really done. The revelation would destroy the comfortable narrative of righteous victory, but it would honor the memory of Sojin's people. Or he could stay silent, keep the truth buried with the classified files and sealed reports. Let humanity celebrate its heroes and sleep soundly in the knowledge that they had been the good ones in an evil war. Either choice would define the rest of his life. Hyunwoo stood in the memorial garden until dawn, surrounded by the names of friends who had unknowingly participated in genocide, holding the testimonies of a people who would soon be extinct, wearing medals that represented both humanity's greatest triumph and its most shameful secret. In the growing light of morning, he made his choice.